The desert wind howled through the crooked wooden town of Dry Creek as the sheriff dragged a wounded girl across the dirt. Her dress was torn, her lip bleeding, and her small wrists bound with rope. "Caught stealing bread," the sheriff barked to the crowd. "Gonna teach her a lesson." The girl, barely 16, whimpered, "Please, don't beat me." "I'm already hurt." The people looked away. No one wanted trouble. No one but the quiet man sitting on the edge of the saloon porch, a cowboy with tired eyes and a revolver resting beside his boots. The sheriff raised his belt, ready to strike, but a voice cut through the heat. "That's enough." The sheriff turned. The cowboy stood now, tall and calm, shadow stretching long across the dust. "Ain't your concern, Boone," the sheriff sneered. "She's a thief." Eli Boone's voice stayed steady. "She's a child." The silence thickened. Then, without another word, Eli stepped forward. "Let her go," the sheriff laughed. "Or what?" Eli didn't answer. The sun glinted off his gun belt, old, worn, but ready. The sheriff hesitated. Everyone in Dry Creek knew Eli Boone never bluffed. Grumbling, the sheriff shoved the girl to the ground. "Fine, she's your problem now." Eli offered her his hand, rough but gentle. "Come on," he said softly. She stared at him, confused, trembling. Why'd you help me?" "Because someone should have," he said simply. He helped her up and led her away from the gawking crowd. Whispers followed, but Eli didn't care. The girl limped beside him, clutching her side where a bruise darkened her skin. "Got a name?" he asked. "Lena," she whispered. "Lena what?" She looked down. "Don't got one." He nodded. "Then you do now. Lena Boone." They walked out of town, past the train tracks, and into the fading light. Eli's horse waited by the old hitching post. "Can you ride?" he asked. She nodded weakly. He lifted her gently into the saddle and mounted behind her. As they rode toward his ranch, she rested her head against his chest, eyes fluttering with exhaustion. For the first time in months, she felt safe. The rhythm of the horse's hooves, the smell of leather and dust, it all felt like freedom. Eli said nothing more that night, just rode steady into the crimson sunset. By the time they reached the ranch, darkness had fallen. The cabin stood alone against the vast plains, small but warm with firelight flickering through the window. Eli helped her down and led her inside. "Sit," he said, pouring her water. She drank greedily, tears mixing with dirt on her cheeks. "You can sleep here tonight, safe." "Ain't nobody ever helped me without wantin' something," she whispered. Eli looked at her over the fire. "Then I guess I'm nobody." She smiled faintly, too tired to speak again. Within minutes, she was asleep by the hearth, wrapped in a wool blanket. Eli watched her for a long while, remembering faces from his past. His sister, beaten by a cruel ranch hand, long gone now. That same helplessness had returned when he saw Lena in the dirt. He'd vowed never to look away again. The fire crackled. Outside, coyotes howled across the desert. He leaned back, whispering to the night, "You're safe now, kid." When dawn came, he found her still asleep, clutching the blanket like it was life itself. For the first time in years, his cabin didn't feel so empty. The days passed slow and quiet. Lena healed, the bruises fading, her eyes growing brighter. She helped Eli feed the horses, patch fences, and cook meals. "You work like you've been doing this all your life," he said one morning. She shrugged. "Worked every place I could till they sent me away." "Why?" he asked. She looked down. "Said I was too much trouble." "Guess I am." Eli smiled faintly. "You're not trouble, Lena, you're just tough." She didn't answer, but for the first time, she didn't feel ashamed of it. One afternoon, the sheriff rode up with 2 deputies. "Boone!" he shouted. Eli stepped out, rifle in hand. "You keeping that girl?" "She's under my roof, yeah. She's wanted for thieving." Eli's jaw tightened. "She's a kid who was starving. That ain't a crime." The sheriff smirked. "You'll hand her over or we'll take her." Eli's voice went flat. "You'll try." The deputies shifted uneasily. Everyone knew Boone's aim was legendary. The sheriff spat on the ground. "You're making a mistake." Eli shook his head. "No, I'm fixing one." That night, Lena sat by the fire, silent. "You shouldn't have done that," she said. "They'll come back." Eli leaned on the table. "I ain't scared of men like them, but why risk it?" she whispered. "Because I've seen what happens when no one stands up." His words hung heavy in the air. Lena looked at him differently then. Not as a stranger, but as someone who carried the same pain she did. The same loneliness. "I don't know how to thank you," she murmured. "Don't," he said softly. "Just live." A few days later, Eli took her into town again, ignoring the stares. He bought her a proper dress, boots that fit, and a ribbon for her hair. "Ain't never worn something this nice," she said, twirling shyly. Eli smiled. "Looks right on you." The shopkeeper smiled too, embarrassed at how he'd looked away the first time. Kindness had a way of spreading, even in a town like Dry Creek. Lena walked out of that store taller, not just because of the boots, but because someone finally saw her as more than a burden. Spring brought new life to the ranch. Flowers bloomed along the fence line, and Lena's laughter filled the air. She learned to ride, to shoot, even to rope a calf. "You're a natural," Eli said. She grinned. "Guess I had a good teacher." At night, they'd sit on the porch watching the stars, the desert wind cool and gentle. She'd tell stories about her dreams, owning a small shop someday, maybe a horse of her own. Eli listened quietly, knowing he'd do anything to make that happen. One night, while gathering wood, Lena heard hoofbeats. The sheriff's men again. She ran inside. "Eli, they're here." He grabbed his rifle and stepped onto the porch. "Stay inside," he ordered. The sheriff rode up, lantern swinging. "Boone, this is your last warning." Eli cocked his rifle. "You already had yours." Gunfire cracked across the night. Dust and firelight blurred together. When it was over, the sheriff's men were gone, and Eli stood bleeding, shoulder torn. Lena rushed to him, sobbing. "You can't leave me, Eli." He smiled faintly. "Ain't planning to." She patched him up through the night, hands trembling, tears mixing with blood. When he finally woke, the sun was rising, warm light spilling through the cabin. "You're stubborn," he muttered weakly. "Guess I learned from the best," she said, smiling through tears. He laughed, wincing. "You'll be all right, Lena. You're stronger than anyone I know." She took his hand. "So are you." For the first time, the silence between them didn't feel empty. It felt like family. Months passed, and Lena grew into her strength. People in town no longer whispered when she rode in. They nodded, respectful. She sold her handmade blankets and bread, saving every coin. Eli watched with quiet pride. One evening, she came to him with a small pouch of money. "I'm buying the old barn in town. Gonna start my shop," he grinned. "Knew you would." "You'll visit?" she asked. He nodded. "Every damn day." She hugged him tight. "You gave me a life, Eli." "No," he said softly. "You built it yourself." Years later, travelers would pass through Dry Creek and hear the story of the silent cowboy and the girl he saved. They'd say kindness changed everything, that a man who'd lost his voice found it in protecting someone who had none. And in the little shop by the river, the sign read, "Lena Boone's, bread, blankets, and hope." She never forgot the man who taught her that being broken didn't mean being beyond repair, and that in a world so cruel, one act of mercy could echo forever across the Wild West.